Well, let's talk about the cost of living and the Dunkley by-election in this context as well. I've just seen an email from the Liberal Party sent to all of its supporters plus voters in the seat of Dunkley that's saying to voters, you know, give the Albanese government a bit of a wake-up call. That seems to be the message that the Liberal Party is trying to get through to voters there in Dunkley. I spoke to Anthony Albanese about the cost of living crisis yesterday, and I want to talk further now with Independent MP Dai about this. Dai, thanks so much for your time. I put to Anthony Albanese yesterday just the extent of how tough people are doing it. And I actually, and look, he rattled off a whole list of things, and I put to him your push on the fuel excise. Let's quickly take a look at that. If you say you're doing everything about cost of living and trying to help people out, why don't you cut the petrol excise?
What we're doing is taking the best advice on how we can make a difference without putting pressure on inflation. So when we made the changes to the tax cuts, the previous arrangements were going to cost $106 billion over the 4 years. Our tax cuts cost $107 billion over the forward estimates, so that we're making these changes, putting dollars in people's pockets who really need it, low and middle income earners.
Sounds like a no, Dai.
Well, it sounds like that's what he often does. You ask a question and then he diverts to then going back to the statutory tax cuts, which I understand. You know, he wants to sell something that he believes that every Australian will get some tax benefit from July this year. From my perspective, the excise fuel tax cut would actually benefit working Australians and many Australians who need to drive to work, and I think it's extending that, and that's an immediate relief as opposed to waiting till July. And then the statutory tax cuts really only will give you about $15 in your pocket, which yes, we should be grateful. But if you think about the costs of living, the increases in electricity prices, I keep on harping on about this, but gas prices, soaring food costs, insurance prices, of course, rental and housing affordability. So the $15 really, if we put that into perspective, I don't know, my community in Fowler, we should be grateful for $15 a week, absolutely, to buy a couple of cups of coffee. But I think that addressing something now to do something now that is meaningful, that really gives people money in their pocket now and relief, well, not money, but relief them some way, is to do something now the government hasn't done.
Yeah,
so
that's right. I mean, and Di, I don't know whether grateful is the right word either. I mean, they get to keep $15 more a week of their own money that they've worked hard for. I mean, this is the whole problem when people talk about taxes, particularly in federal parliament. They forget that it's people earning the money and the government is taxing. But you asked about HECS in question time yesterday as well, whether the government was going to do anything about their indexing, and you got another pivot in the answer to that as well. Is that right?
Yes, that was right. Again, this is similar to the way that you asked the question around the excise fuel tax cut. The Prime Minister went over to statutory tax cuts, but then he didn't complete his answer because I stood up and asked, look, I was going to say, where's the relevance? Because I was asking about when will the government freeze the HECS. As you know, the HECS indexation is 7%, and for our university students, that's compounding. And there's so many, angles to that because, young people are paying taxes. The ones that are going to work is starting as well. And at the end of it, they have a huge debt. I've got one student who's got a debt of about $60,000 as a result of her studying. Now, she has to work to pay that off. Now, that is not going to be written off, and the tax cut is not going to make any difference to that for her, that debt. And so, therefore, I'm asking the government, because we are actually leaving the young people out of this whole statutory tax cut because of the HECS debt. Right?
That's right.
We need to do something again.
It's completely eaten up.
And it's just, Yeah, and the government is not addressing that. So we need to really address the HECS debt for many of our young people. If we want to encourage them to own their first home, for instance, they can't go and get a loan, even under the Help to Buy scheme. They can't get a loan if they have that kind of huge debt. So it's really, the government has to look at holistically when they come out with a policy and how they're going to address these kind of issues.
Yep, they certainly do. Just before I let you go, Dai, ASIO, the ASIO boss says there's a former politician that essentially sold out Australians. The good news is that person is no longer in Parliament. Do you think they should be named?
Wow, look, you know, I think eventually they should be identified. I understand probably the whole privacy issue around that, and maybe there's further investigation and further information that needs to be collected. But actually, we need to make an example of people that we can't sell information, to foreign, yeah. So I think it's very important that we make it transparent, right? We need to make sure that if we catch somebody who's doing the wrong thing, once we get to the point whereby there's evidence that they have done it and there's enough information there, we absolutely have to make sure that that person is known. Because especially if they actually have a high position in the government, it's security. I mean, we're expected as politicians to ensure that everything is declared, everything is, we are in the public. Under public scrutiny. So why shouldn't somebody who actually has access to information and selling it on, why shouldn't they be accountable?
Well said. We will see where this one ends up. Dai Lee, thanks for your time as always.
Thanks, Laura.